and welcome to this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hennig. This week on the podcast, we're going to get into the aftermath of NBA free agency and the biggest dominoes to fall that were LeBron James and Paul George. Also going to have a candid conversation with my co-host from 97.3 ESPN show Hanging with Hendricks and Hennig. Dashawn Hendricks will be joining me on this week's Mutant Blitz Podcast. And also, we will get into my review of Ant-Man and The Wasp. I saw it this week. I'll give you my thoughts on the movie, as well as what it means for the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it could tie in with Avengers 4. So let's get started on this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. Before we get to my candid conversation with my co-host, Dashawn Hendricks, I didn't get a chance to record the podcast last week. Had a lot of different things going on, the holiday and all that kind of stuff. But we're back in the saddle. We're back at it this week. And I want to touch on the aftermath of NBA free agency. First of all, let's start with the domino that hit before midnight on July 1st. And that was Paul George announcing he was going to stay in Oklahoma City with the Thunder. And to me, this had a lot to do with Russell Westbrook. And Paul George said so during post-announcement interviews. He mentioned the environment of the Thunder, the culture of the city, and it kind of gets back to the conversation we've been having here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast, conversation I've tried to have with a lot of people on the radio and off the radio, and that is people have to stop forcing their view of the world and their perspectives on the decisions of other people. It doesn't matter that you think Paul George's best fit was the Sixers. It doesn't matter if you think LeBron James made a bad basketball decision going into the Lakers. It doesn't matter if you think Tony Parker is going to look weird in a Charlotte Hornets uniform next year. These decisions made by these athletes are done through their own worldview, through their own lives. They're their own people. And too often, we don't factor in what the athlete thinks. We try to force on the athlete what we think they should do. And I've gone out of my way in the last several years to try to distance myself from forcing my scruples and my perspectives on how I think athletes are going to make their decisions. And I found that it has helped me not just understand the athletes better, but actually have better analysis of sports altogether, because I'm being inspective of the athlete themselves, and I'm being very aware of what matters to them most. Paul George is from the Los Angeles area. He grew up his entire life wanting to be a Laker. He grew up an hour away from another LA guy, Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook even went to UCLA for college, something that Paul George didn't do. So Rustin didn't just get to play high school in his hometown. He got to go to college in his hometown as well. And it is Russ's decision to stay in Oklahoma City that has kept that franchise relevant. It is also Russ's decision to stay at OKC that helped influence Paul's decision from one LA guy to another. They were able to have conversations about life, about basketball, about the NBA that most people cannot have at all. Most people don't understand what it's like to grow up your entire life in one city, dream to play in one city, and then be forced to go play and live somewhere else. And when the opportunity is presented to you, all the emotions and all the things you start factoring in, it's the money, it's the culture, it's the environment. How do you like your teammates? How do you like the city? How do you like the organization? I genuinely believe that Paul George looked at the situation in Oklahoma City and felt it was best for him short and long term. Yeah, the money helps. He can max out his money in Oklahoma City, not just for the next 2 years, but beyond that, because in 2 years, the Thunder can offer him another contract up to almost $300 million. And that's a big deal for a guy who didn't come from money. He didn't come from a rich family. He understands the value of maximizing what he has right now. Also, this is a guy who broke his leg a few years ago in a freak basketball incident. It's just a total accident. He understands how fleeting his career is. He's trying to put himself and his family in the best situation for the long term, not just the short term. I can't begrudge an athlete for that. And just because you think said athlete should go to said team, it doesn't mean it's how they're thinking. I don't think Paul George ever considered the Sixers. Not because he hates the Sixers. And I don't think he ever considered the Clippers. Not because he hates the Clippers. And I don't think Paul George considered many other options. Not because he hates those teams or hates those cities, but because I think the Thunder in Oklahoma City has such a massive impact on him that he felt comfortable and he felt happy there. And sometimes happiness is more important than anything else. An athlete to be comfortable allows him to play at his best. The same thing with LeBron James. LeBron James prioritized his family and his wife above anything else. That's what he said in the post-press conference. That's what insiders like Brian Windhorst said. That's what other people have said about LeBron, and that is LeBron was about putting his wife and his kids in a situation they'd be happy with, and LeBron prioritizes his family above anything else. Do not overlook the power of a man who never had a father, who promises his kids that he is going to be a father to them and he is going to be in their life. That is a powerful thing. How much that means to him, how much that means to a man. This man, not saying he doesn't care about winning. LeBron is telling you that it's not all about winning, that he feels his legacy is intact. LeBron's going to win another championship in his career, but he wasn't looking at what the best situation for him to win short term. He's looking how to win long term. And don't overlook what this team they're building is. JaVale McGee, Lance Stevenson, Rajon Rondo, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. These are not elite shooters, but these are all guys who can play defense. And that's the dangerous thing for the rest of the Western Conference that this team is doing. This Lakers team is building a roster that is straight up going to get in people's face and be physical. Lance Stevenson and Rajon Rondo are afraid of no one. They will guard right up in somebody's face. They will get into fights. They don't care. They are high enough level players to be effective on offense and defense. I think the Lakers understand that while they're maintaining the salary cap space for next year, with the one-year contracts given to Rondo, KCP, Stevenson, and JaVale McGee, they're not just holdovers, but also this is the Lakers' chance to rough up the Western Conference. This is a chance for them to make it a little bit of a dirty fight in the ring of the playoffs. LeBron's going to be in the playoffs, but when he gets there, he's going to have a bunch of guys who are going to make life difficult for the Warriors, for the Rockets, for the Blazers, for whoever makes it to the postseason, because for a lot of these finesse teams, they don't fully understand how to cope and handle with physical defenders, because today's league is a much more wide open league. There's not as much physicality. So when you get a bunch of physical guys on one team, a bunch of guys who are unafraid to make the hard foul, guys who are unafraid to play 90 feet of defense, guys who are unafraid to trash talk, that takes a lot of pressure off of LeBron, a lot of attention off of him, allows him to do what he does while the rest of the opponents are focusing on Rondo and Stevens getting under their skin. Coming up next, my candid conversation with my 97.3 ESPN co-host of Hangin' with Hendricks and Hennig Monday nights from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Dashawn and Hendricks coming up right here on the Mutant Blitz Podcast. And welcome into my candid conversation. And I had to have this guy on eventually. He's a friend of mine, but he's also my co-host on 97.3 ESPN. You can listen to Hanging with Hendricks and Hennig every Monday night from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on 97.3 ESPN FM Atlantic City. Dashawn Hendricks joining me. How you doing on this night?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you doing? It's finally great to be on this podcast. I've heard a lot about it. I've listened to it, and now I'm happy to be on it.
Well, I'm happy to have you here because I wanted to jump into this conversation about so many times, and I think you're the perfect person to have this conversation with because you're not just another dude talking about sports. You've played sports at multiple levels, and you've met a lot of guys over the years, so you understand what I'm going to say to you more than most people do. That is, so many times people try to force how they view the world on these athletes' decisions. And so many times, yeah, you and I can sit there and say thumbs up, thumbs down about what these athletes do, but these athletes are their own people. And when these athletes make a decision to go somewhere in free agency and they're saying it's about their families, about their future, it's sometimes unfair for us to tell them how they should live their lives because we're not in their shoes.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing when you're making a decision of that magnitude is you're thinking about three things. One, you're thinking about your happiness in that profession. You always want to work somewhere where you're comfortable in the environment, you're comfortable going to work every day. That's the biggest thing. Secondly is your family. How does your family feel about, the move? Obviously there's a living aspect to where your children have to go to school somewhere. Your wife has to relocate work. You got those extended family members, your mother, your aunt, whoever, that you support financially. And then last but not least, it's a winning situation when it comes to sports. You want to be able to win. You want to be able to say that you went from a situation that was mediocre to a situation that now you can kind of be successful in.
One of the things about LeBron James that I have a lot of respect for is that, and you know me, I'm a Dwayne Wade guy. I'm not a LeBron guy, but I'll put that aside for this moment. Here's my thing with LeBron's decision to go to L.A. He has said in many interviews that because he grew up without a father, he wanted to be in his kids' lives. He always wanted to be around them. He's going to prioritize his wife and his kids. LeBron is one of the few dudes in the NBA who does not have all these side pieces in all of these cities, okay? So this is a guy who prioritizes family. He values his wife and his kids. So for a man to sit there and say, I'm making this decision for my kids and for my wife, I have so much respect for that. It's not a basketball thing. It's about understanding that this is a man prioritizing his family. And for anybody to look down on that and put him down for making that decision for his family, to me is really disgusting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, listen, I'm a father of two boys. My oldest son plays football. He plays basketball. I coach him, and I'm very much involved in what he does as far as sports-wise. And, I've come from that same thing. My father was murdered when I was younger. I didn't have that male role model. So I can see exactly where LeBron's coming from when it comes to, being that strong male role model for his sons and trying to be there to kind of prolong his son's career and give him the best opportunity to be successful. I have no problem with what LeBron James did. At the end of the day, he always wanted to be in LA, in my opinion. I thought, he wanted to go back to Cleveland and be there to fulfill that promise and win that championship. And in Miami, obviously, was just about winning championships because he didn't have any.
Do you think it's unfair that fans sometimes try to take this ownership of these players? They have this attitude like, well, you belong to me. You should do this or that because that's what I think you should say or do. You look at a guy like Odubel Herrera from the Phillies. From my perspective, I think he's fun. I think he's eccentric. He's a great ball player. But there's all of these old, and as you call them, get off my lawn types who sit there and they turn around and they're like, oh, he's not traditional. He's a little flamboyant. He does all these crazy batting stances. But to me, he's being himself. And if that gets the guy 30 home runs this season, I don't care. But some people, they have this attitude of they think they own these players because they're fans of that team.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we both know, and we talk about it, a bunch of times on our show, that I value being yourself. If you aren't yourself, then who are you? You're a guy that's doing, towing the company line, and that doesn't get you a new contract. That doesn't get you comfortable in your own skin. One of my favorite players, as you know, Allen Iverson, one of the reasons I loved him the most was because the guy did things his way. Now, it didn't always end up the right way, but he stayed true to himself. At the end of the day, a guy like Odubel, he's great because of what he does. If he didn't do those things, the bat flips, the antics, those types of things, then he wouldn't be special. And the reason that everyone can identify with his personality is because of who he is, not who he's trying to be.
For you, who's a guy playing in sports today, doesn't matter what the sport is, that you look at and say, I appreciate his authenticity. I appreciate the fact that that athlete takes ownership of being an individual, being independent?
Wow, that's a great question. I'd have to say Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, we all know his Twitter antics. We all know how he is, on social media. The LeBron, chase that he was doing, the Rihanna thing. I love Joel Embiid and how he's comfortable in his own skin. Now, there was a lot of people that didn't agree with that because he didn't play his first couple seasons in the league. They were like, we have more minutes than you, et cetera, et cetera. But Joel Embiid stayed true to who he was. And, he's only played maybe a season and a half, if you want to count those first 23 games he's played the first season. But he's a budding superstar in this league, and an all-star in his first full season. And you can make an argument if he plays his first full season more than 23 games, he would have won Rookie of the Year. With that being said, Joel Embiid is a guy that I can say, I love the way he is, and I don't see him changing anytime soon.
I want to play this clip for you. This is a clip that, Brian Windhorst was on the Dan Le Batard show this week. And, I think for some people this was a controversial statement, but this statement in and of itself embodies the positive and negative of all these LeBron conversations. So I'm going to play this cut, and I want to hear Dashawn Hendricks' response to what Brian Windhorst has to say. You ready?
Yep.
And I think there's a big reason with Philadelphia. First off, I don't think his family was 100% invested in moving to Philadelphia, and I do think they wanted to live in L.A., and that's why I say it's more than just basketball. I think his family's where they wanted to live played a factor. And secondly, I don't think from a basketball standpoint Philadelphia is a great fit. And I know that Joel Embiid was out there recruiting him on social media, but I'm not so sure that he and Joel Embiid would have been the greatest fit together.
That's a loaded answer, right?
Listen, I tend to have a lot of respect for Brian Windhorst. He's like the LeBron guru for ESPN. We both know that. But at the end of the day, I don't think that LeBron would have had a problem, playing with Joel Embiid. Now, listen, LeBron is a strong personality. So, obviously those two would have clashed at some point, whether it be if the team is doing well or the team is struggling, because that's just how basketball is. I've played all my life, and I've clashed with some great players over touches or whatever the case may be. But at the end of the day, you have that mutual respect for each other. And I think that would have won out when it came to LeBron James and Joel Embiid because of that mutual respect. With that same token, I can see what he's saying basketball-wise because Joel Embiid does require a lot of touches. But people don't understand that LeBron James is entering that second era of his basketball career where he's going to need younger stars to kind of take that mantra and push it forward and basically help him win championships. That was the problem in Cleveland. You look at now the situation in L.A., yes, they have young stars, but none of those guys are on the level of a Joel Embiid where they've established themselves as an all-star in this league.
How many championships does LeBron win in purple and gold when it's all said and done?
That's a tough question because right now, I don't think it's a finished product when you talk about the Los Angeles Lakers and their roster. Again, he did sign a 4-year deal. I think he can opt out after the third season. I think that LeBron James has maybe one more championship left in him. And I think that the fact is that Magic Johnson is building a team right now to where he could compete this year as far as just being relevant. But I think those 1-year deals signify that they want to be players in next year's free agent market and really load up this team when the Warriors start to, come up on their contract situations. Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Kevin Durant, and obviously DeMarcus Cousins. So I do see right now maybe one championship for LeBron James in the Lakers jersey.
You mentioned the Warriors. Let's be realistic. This is you and me talking here, okay? We're real with each other. What is the real window of this Warriors dynasty? Like, how long can they really keep doing this?
The Warriors thing is such a confusing, question because when you look at the Warriors, obviously the DeMarcus Cousins move is big, but we don't know when he's coming back.
It's also only for 1 year. That's 1 year.
And exactly. It's a 1 year deal. It's a mid-level exception. Big men usually don't come back from those type of injuries, being the offensive threat that DeMarcus Cousins was the last couple of seasons. And that also can affect them negatively as far as the locker room, because DeMarcus Cousins is a very interesting personality, I'll put it that way. But if everything goes according to plan, the Warriors could obviously have another 2 to 3 year window, because those guys, they're in their prime. And Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, I don't think people give these guys enough credit for how unselfish they are to allow a Kevin Durant on their team and basically say, hey, we're going to allow you to take the shine, win the finals MVPs, get all that scrutiny, but still play your game and win championships. You know, Steph Curry was on the cusp of being talked about as the best player in the world, along with LeBron James, if people don't remember. So
back-to-back MVPs.
Exactly, and a unanimous MVP at that, a 73-9 season. So I don't think people give them enough credit, especially in today's day and age where everyone is about themselves and their brand. At the end of the day, though, 2 to 3 year window when it comes to the Warriors, I see as far as their championship window.
You mentioned their brand. I was having a conversation about this with somebody earlier today, and that is, I think the NBA has done an amazing job at allowing these athletes to grow their brands, encouraging them to grow their brands. And I think one of the reasons why the NBA skyrocketed past baseball is basically crushed the NHL. Baseball and hockey are international sports too. What the NBA has done that the other two sports have not been able to do is they have taken their stars and they have put them on a pedestal in front of the world and said, be your own person, showcase yourself, do all you can do, because when you're profitable, we're profitable.
Yeah, I mean, the NBA is real special when it comes to their players' union and their owners, because to me, the NBA is a players' league, first and foremost. You look at these other sports with the NFL, and you see kind of how the labor disputes kind of become really, really discomforting when you start to read how these owners really view their players. And the NBA is totally different. Adam Silver is one of the most transparent commissioners I've ever seen. I mean, the NBA is heading in the right direction, and people want to complain and say, well, I mean, the players have too much power. No, I think they have just enough. The NBA is player-driven. If you go to a game, a Sixers game, and Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and Markelle Fultz aren't on the floor, realistically, how many tickets are the Sixers selling? Brett Brown, as good as a coach as he is, and as good as everyone, wants to make him out to be in the future, which, you know me, I'm still on the fence about Brett Brown winning this team a championship as a head coach. I believe that he can do it, but I didn't see anything last season that kind of, pushed me forward as the Brett Brown leading campaign guy. But my point is that you need players in this league to not only make money as a franchise, but to really push the narrative that you are a winning team. I don't think coaches, do that. I think it's players. The NBA is a players' league, and I think that's why that league is trending upward, not down.
All right, I got some questions for you, and I want some raw takes, okay?
There you go.
Is the NBA Summer League, what happens there, overhyped?
Yes. The NBA Summer League is one of the most overhyped things that I have ever heard. Listen, I love Summer League just as much as the next guy. I am not, negative Summer League. But when Trae Young scores 7 points in a Summer League game and people are calling him a bust before he even plays his first NBA game, stop it. Let me just stop it. I just can't take that type of garbage. When Markelle Fultz averages 16 points last year in the Summer League, and then he comes out with a shooting problem, and people say, hey, what happened to the guy from Summer League? Summer League is meant for you to be in shape and to get some type of reps in the summer. That's it. That's all. It does not define you as a player. Next.
Is there an award more stupid than the Summer League MVP? If I could just tell you some of the Summer League MVPs, Josh Selby, Tyus Jones, Jared Bayless. I think you're getting my point here.
Jared Bayless won Summer League MVP?
He did.
That just shows you how ridiculous and the reward is. I mean, Jared Bayless won Summer League MVP. The Sixers have been trying to trade him for a bag of chips for the last couple of weeks to get rid of his contract. That's all I got to say about that.
Who is the best shooter in NBA history?
Wow. The best shooter in NBA history. Are we talking just purely jump shooter, off the dribble, a combination? What are we talking, Josh?
Pure swish, pure ability just to shoot.
I'd have to go with Stephen Curry, number 30. I got to go with Steph Curry. I've never seen a more effortless flick of the wrist, off the dribble, catch and shoot. I mean, Steph Curry, to me, is the best three-point shooter to ever lace him up.
So you're putting him ahead of Ray Allen and Reggie Miller and all those guys.
Yes, I'm putting him ahead of all those guys. No disrespect to Ray Allen or Reggie Miller, but they did not have the power to get it off the bounce like Stephen Curry has. I mean, this guy is able to get to any spot on the floor, pull up from beyond 35 feet effortlessly, and make three-point shots consistently. This guy is, beyond a doubt, the best three-point shooter in the NBA history.
True or false? Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, and Kevin Durant are not the best big three to ever play on an NBA team together.
True. They are not the best big three to ever play the game. They've won 2 championships. They've gone 2 for 2. But when I look at Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, Klay Thompson, to me, he plays that third role on and off. I think Draymond Green, some nights you could say he's the third guy. There's some nights where Andre Iguodala could be considered the third guy just because of the things he's doing defensively. This isn't to minimize Klay Thompson as, a star in this league. I think that he's a great player, a tremendous two-way player, maybe the best two-way player in the game today. But when I look at a big three, I look at the Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett. Those guys were the undisputed big three of the team no matter who you brought in. You can make an argument this season when Boogie Cousins is healthy that he's legitimately the third guy over Klay Thompson. You can't say the same with those those previous big three.
Is Randall Cunningham the most unappreciated quarterback in NFL history?
No, I don't believe so. I believe Donovan McNabb is the most underappreciated quarterback in NFL history. Eagle fans, listen, I love you all, and you know that I got y'all back. But y'all need to give Donnie Love some more love. Donovan McNabb led the first real winning Eagles football. I know it didn't go to the championship, but those NFC championship games, those seasons, all of that with Andy Reid was the real taste of this new Eagles era that we've been living. Before Donovan McNabb, the Eagles were not the franchise they are known for today, which is a consistent, relevant franchise. Y'all need to give D5 some more love, y'all.
On NFL Network, on one of their top 10 shows, they said that the greatest show on turf was the greatest offense in NFL history. Are you okay with that, or are you not good with that?
That was the best offense in NFL history?
That was what the NFL Network's top 10
I'd have to disagree with that. I'd have to disagree with that. I think the 2007 Patriots, to me, was the best offense in NFL history. Tom Brady, arguably one of the greatest quarterbacks, if not the greatest quarterback of all time. And then you got Randy Moss, who is one of the greatest, if not the greatest wide receiver of all time, putting up historical numbers in a 16-0 regular season. That, to me, was better than that Rams team. I know that team didn't win a championship, but hell, it wasn't because of the offense.
All right, so if you're saying Tom Brady may be the greatest quarterback of all time, I give you 2 minutes. I'm giving you your pick of quarterback, wide receiver, and running back. Who are your 3 guys? You got 2 minutes left in the game.
To go down the field, man. Who's my coaching staff? Does it matter? I mean,
pick your coaching staff. Pick your coaching staff. I don't care.
You know what? I'm feeling pretty generous, man. I'll take Doug Peterson. I'll take Doug Peterson as my coach. He's a Super Bowl champion head coach, coming off a Super Bowl championship. You giving me all time? I get to pick all time.
All time.
Oh man.
You get to have whoever in their prime.
Give me Jerry Rice at wideout. Give me Barry Sanders in the backfield. And that quarterback, give me Joe Montana. RPOs, baby.
RPOs, love it. Of course, you can hear myself and Dashawn Hendricks every Monday night from 6 to 8 Eastern. I almost gave us 2 more hours there. 6 to 8
I'm about to say,
Eastern.
don't give us 2 more hours. You know I need happy hour. I need that happy hour.
6 to 8 Eastern every Monday night on 97.3 ESPN FM Atlantic City. Dashawn, appreciate you joining me on the Mutant Blitz Podcast, and I'll see you Monday night.
I'll see you then, Josh. And remember, it's always great to be me.
We wrap up this week's edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast with my thoughts and review of the Ant-Man and the Wasp movie that came out this past weekend. I am giving you a spoilers warning for this review, so if you don't want to be ruined for anything with the movie, go ahead and jump to the end of the video now. But if you have seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers before you go see a movie, here we go. Well, first of all, to me, Ant-Man and the Wasp was very well placed in its structure within the Marvel chronology. So where it's set is after the events of Captain America Civil War and before the Thanos snap at the end of Avengers Infinity War. And it's placed there in a very appropriate manner because what it's going to mean next for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We'll get to that momentarily. So we have Scott Lang. He's dealing with being on house arrest. He wants to help Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne when he gets a message about the possibility that her mother, Hope's mother, Janet, is still alive in the quantum realm. Now, the one interesting thing about them using the quantum realm instead of the microverse, I think is a very specific understanding by Marvel that they can't use every idea from the comics in these movies. I think the microverse would be a lot harder to explain in a sci-fi sense just because it's very specific to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. There's really no microverse in any other science fiction lore, whereas the quantum realm is something in terms of actual science as well as science fiction that has been talked about and has been delved into other areas. So bringing the quantum realm and to this science fiction world of Ant-Man and the Wasp, I think was a very good idea by Marvel. I know it's not fully comic accurate, but I get it. It makes sense. And it works out well because when we get to the end of the movie, we find out with Scott Lang stuck in the quantum realm is going to have a specific link to Infinity War. And how we got there was that Hank Pym and Hope have been building this bridge to get to the quantum realm itself. My only beef with a lot of these Marvel movies is so much of this stuff happens solo. There's very little crossover in some of these movies, and I think that's a little annoying because I understand that Hank Pym is trying to do this on his own. He doesn't want other people to get a hands on his research, on his studies, on his science. But at the same time, it seems very unlikely that the only people trying to hunt down Hank Pym and Hope Van Dyne happen to be the FBI and this villain called Ghost, which is a total retcon of the Ghost from the comics. The Ghost in the comics, as well as the villain Sonny Birch, who's really more so the villain than Ghost is in this film, they are both originally Iron Man villains. So it seems like what Marvel did is they took different villains of different characters and made a trade-off. They gave Iron Man the burden of creating Ultron and then in turn creating Vision, which was originally Hank Pym's doing in the comics, and then gave Hank Pym two Iron Man characters of Ghost and Sonny Birch. So it's almost like they did a trade-off there. I think for the purposes of the movies, the trade-off was very appropriate and worked out very well. The whole concept of Ava dealing with quantum entanglement and having to deal with her health issue was a very appropriate tie-in for this. They didn't spend enough time going into Janet Van Dyne's role in the Marvel Universe because of her quantum powers, I guess you could call them, and the fact that she survived in the quantum realm as long as she did. She makes a comment at one point that time works differently in the quantum realm than it does in the real world. And she warns Scott Lang of these time vortexes. She says, make sure you don't sucked into one of them because we'll never be able to find you. Ironically enough, when he gets stuck in there, I think that's how he gets out. Before we get to my theory of how this connects to Avengers 4, I just want to say that I thought Ant-Man and the Wasp was very well done. It was a very fun movie. It's a fun, laughable ride. Michael Pena is great in this movie. Scott Lang's buddy. I think he's funnier and gets even more screen time in this movie. I really enjoyed the fact that they mixed in a lot of the elements from the comics, like ex-cons getting jobs, how they have Cassie say she wants to grow up and be a superhero. Well, in the comics, she does grow up to be a superhero named Stature. So there's a lot of little factors that get mixed in to this movie that really allows you to have not just fun in terms of the jokes and the silliness of the characters, but gives you your mix-in of comic book stuff as well. Ant-Man and the Wasp, again, is a perfect follow-up to Infinity War, because Infinity War ended on a very down note. The villain won, all-powerful Thanos won the day, and the heroes are left picking up, basically the rubble of what's left over of the entire world. And you get a nice preview of what the world is like without those superheroes, without those people who are now snapped out of existence. They show you at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, homes empty, TV networks off the air, things that you wouldn't expect to see if all those people were still alive. And it's a very eerie moment at the end of the movie. And I think that's how we get to Avengers 4. Here is my ridiculously elaborate theory that may or may not be right. We don't know. I think that Scott Lang, in his efforts to get out of the quantum realm, realizes he's stuck and something happened to everybody above him. I think that he ends up in one of those time vortexes. He ends up in the future where he meets up with his daughter, who says, "Daddy, I missed you. I became a superhero. Here I am. I'm helping people." Because she makes that reference in Ant-Man and the Wasp that she wants to grow up and help people. That's what she wants to do when she grows up. So maybe in some world in the future, Scott Lang finds her. Obviously, the world is disarray after all those people died. We've also seen the set photos of an older Iron Man going back into the past to what was 2010, the first Avengers movie, with Scott Lang. I think that Avengers 4, they undo what Thanos did by Tony Stark going into the past with Scott Lang to find a way to prevent Thanos from ever getting his hands on all the Infinity Stones. Because you see in the one set photo, Robert Downey Jr.'s character Tony Stark is talking to Loki after Loki has been arrested. Very convenient thing to catch in a set photo that's been leaked. I think the storyline of Avengers 4 is going to be something like this. Scott Lang ends up in the future. He tells Tony Stark he has a way to go back in time, but they have to figure out how they can harness the quantum realm's vortexes to get there. Once they get back in the past, they set in motion a series of events that will prevent Thanos from ever getting his hands on all the Infinity Stones, forcing Thanos to come to Earth to fight them on their turf. They instead do not go to Thanos' turf. They defeat Thanos. There's some casualties, but the world moves forward with the change in the timeline. Will have various effects on the modern day and the characters moving forward, and one of those changes will have something to do with Captain Marvel coming back to help the superheroes defeat Thanos. That's my elaborate theory of what's going to happen. And I think that Ant-Man's going to have a lot to do with it. We know the next Marvel movie is going to be Captain Marvel. That's coming out before Avengers 4, so that will set more information, more of a groundwork for Avengers 4. And then we have been confirmed that the next Spider-Man movie is going to come out that summer after Avengers 4. And now with Marvel changing one of the release dates in 2021 to February, it looks like that's going to be the time for Black Panther 2. So kind of the mapping of the upcoming Marvel movies is going to be something like this. It's going to be Captain Marvel next year, Avengers 4, Spider-Man 2. Then in 2020, we're going to get most likely Guardians of the Galaxy, along with what is likely to be either a Doctor Strange 2, or that will be where they stick the Black Widow movie, which they just picked a director for after they interviewed 70 potential directors in Marvel Cinematic Studios before picking the current director. And then in 2021, if you're going to have your Black Panther 2, that is also in 2021, where they might have the next Captain Marvel movie, or maybe that's starting when they'll slowly start working in the Fox properties. More likely those Fox properties, if they finish the acquisition in time for X-Men and Fantastic Four, probably won't be worked in until 2022 or 2023. But we do know Marvel has confirmed that they have plans for movies all the way through 2024. So we know that there's a long list of characters. They're going to get their own movies. We expect it to be Black Panther 2, a Spider-Man 3, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and other movies. So Marvel has a long story still running past 2019. And I think Ant-Man and the Wasp is going to facilitate what happens in that Avengers 4. And I think after Avengers 4, you're probably going to see something like a new Avengers, because we're going to see Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and several of the other characters kind of walk off into the sunset, go off and retire. They won't be carrying those mantles anymore, whether it's by death or by, actual retirement. But those contracts are coming up, so we know that those characters are going to be phased out somehow. Thanks again for listening to this edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. If you like the content we bring you this week, hit that like button and also subscribe so you can catch the podcast each and every week. Thanks to my guest, Dashawn Hendricks. You can catch myself and Dashawn every Monday night from 6 to 8 p.m. on 97.3 ESPN FM Atlantic City. And of course, my show is every Saturday from 12 to 2, Sports Bash Saturday on 97.3 ESPN. If you have any thoughts on this week's podcast, drop it down in the comments section below, and I'll catch you next week right here on this YouTube channel for the Mutant Blitz Podcast, where we bring you my perspective on the top sports and comic book TV show and movie stories each and every week.